I finished the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League campaign. I played the Endgame, did almost everything solo, but also played the multiplayer, and I'm still having a great time, but it's totally not without its flaws. I think really the character you play determines how much fun you will have in this game. Members of the squad like Deadshot with his jetpack and King Shark, who can leap high and far, have less exciting and interesting traversal compared to Harley Quinn, for example. She has a grappling hook that she can attach to a drone, or you can attach it to a building, and you also have this fall down sort of ability, and if you combine the two and really get it under control, you can have some really nice momentum going. But Captain Boomerang is by far the most fun character, as throwing your boomerang to zip around the map does not get old. He can also dash around in combat. It's a very unique way to play compared to any game, and the closest to feeling like a superhero, so it only makes doing the Suicide Squad missions more fun. And that was kind of my worry going into this game, that the activities would get repetitive very quickly, but this never actually happened during the story campaign, as they switch things up nicely and treat you with amazing cutscenes and some really cool boss fights. I think the pace in the story campaign is just really well done. The next big story moment is always around the corner. There are these more linear indoor missions as well. Like this being a live service title really did not hinder the main story missions. And you also don't have to worry about loot or gear when taking on the Justice League, so you can just completely ignore that part during the campaign if you don't care about it. The game actually starts pretty cutscene heavy, which is a great way to fall in love with these characters. And as a fan of the anti-hero story arcs in DC, Peacemaker's for example one of my favorite TV shows period, and I really loved the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie as well, so this is right up my alley, and things could have easily gone wrong when trying to focus on humor, but I think they really nailed the tone for this game. The characters are crazy, but in a good and likable way, because they don't think before they talk, they don't hold anything back, so you can get in some really awkward situations, and that's a nice change of pace versus the many more serious AAA games. The performances for each character are really well done, the facial expressions are some of the best I've ever seen in the game, and this really helps with the joke delivery, and they did not hold back. Like this is a big budget video game with some really cool fights, especially when the Justice League gets involved. Now I do think they went a bit too far with the lighter tone near the end, because when the main characters don't take anything seriously, it's hard for you as the player to really care about what's going on as well. While the fact that an alien invasion led by Brainiac has turned all the citizens of Metropolis into purple soldiers is pretty serious, especially because the heroes that would normally stop this turned evil as well and now work for this villain. So that's why I liked the first half of the story a bit more, when the Suicide Squad members struggle with this new reality. Like they got bombs in their head, so they have to do what they are told, and that is to kill the Justice League. But because things are going pretty well and they keep making fun of everything, the whole story does lose a bit of its impact, not to mention that it does not really work well with the previously established Arkhamverse that was way more serious. Still, that does not take away from the fact that this is totally worth experiencing because of the great realization of the Suicide Squad characters and the huge production value and presentation that is easily up there with the best superhero games. So if you were at any point interested in this game, then I totally think it's worth your time, but you just have to think by yourself, like what is a 10 to 11 hour story campaign worth it to me, and are you willing to stick around for the end game, because then you can get way more out of it. Like I'm actually impressed by some of the RPG elements and look forward to trying different builds and playstyles. We will of course have tips for that on the channel, so subscribe to not miss it, and if you like the review so far, leaving a like would really help me out, so thanks for that. But yeah, if you're not into looter shooters like a Borderlands or The Division, then this part of the game will be way less for you. I was first kind of worried about it, but in the first 10 hours you really never have to grind or get better loot in order to take on the many bosses. I actually switched the game to hard near the end because I wanted more of a challenge. So if you just want to focus on the main story, then you can just go from main mission to main mission through the decently sized open world. Yeah, Metropolis is not that big. I don't mind it, because it means that you are very quickly at your next objective. Just don't go in expecting a big open world game. Sure, there is an open map, but it's more like a wide play space that you can freely navigate through. There will be enemies spawning in that you can take out if you want. Sometimes you will encounter a loot alien that you totally want to chase for some nice rewards. And as you progress through the story, you will also unlock a few side activities, like the traversal challenges from the Riddler that you can choose to tackle with any character, and they get more and more challenging the further you get into the game. And every support character you meet throughout the story campaign will also have optional missions for you that change the familiar gameplay up quite a lot. So while the objectives are very often the same, like rescue citizens or kill enemies in under a time limit, the support missions add a twist to it, like where you can only deal damage to enemies when doing critical hits. Every other attack heals them. And for another mission, you first have to take out a particular enemy to get a damage buff before you can deal damage to the other targets. Sometimes you have to test vehicles and destroy enemies that way. Again, these missions are not required for the main story, but super important to complete after you reach the end game because they unlock some very important features to further customize your character. But there's more, because you can also replay any story mission after completing them, and you will also get rewards from that. So this basically functions as a New Game Plus mode, because you can pick the first mission and then just go through the complete game again with a fully upgraded character, or you can just immediately jump to some of your favorite missions or repeat one of the boss fights that are totally the highlight of the story. You can then also do them again with a new difficulty that unlocked after finishing the story once. So there's quite a lot here if you dig the Suicide Squad gameplay and want to keep playing. And then I did not even touch on the end game. The transition from the main campaign to the end game is pretty seamless, because you already have to do one end game run before you see the credits. So in short, the end game is about earning a currency by doing activities in the open world, and while the locations vary, the activities are things you've already done before, but now they're a bit more challenging, and they also give you Promethium, and that is needed to enter Brainiac's domain. Inside Brainiac's domain, you have one of 3 different objectives, and we've seen these objectives before. They are the same from the main story, but now you're on a timer, so it's a bit more difficult, and after completing them, you also have to quickly get out through a portal, and then you are successful. Now, as you progress through the end game, unlock higher difficulties, you also can do a horde mode, where you have to fight increasingly difficult enemies. Like, the longer you fight, the more difficult the enemies get, and it's kind of a risk-reward situation, because the longer you stay and the more enemies you fight, the higher the rewards, but if you die, you lose it all. So at one point you have to decide to leave, and then you can claim your rewards. Now, the first time you do the end game, there's also a special Brainiac boss fight. First, in his domain, you have to do multiple objectives, and then you can face this special boss, but it's a repeat of one of the Justice League encounters. I don't want to spoil it, but still, it's only one, and it's kind of hard to do this boss again. Like, you have to be pretty far into the end game to be able to repeat it, so it's not something you can like do over and over. And of course, the main reason to do these end game activities is because you are rewarded with special villain themed gear and weapons, and they have some really fun perks. So the Bane set is available right now, with more coming later, and when you combine 3 of these items, you can unlock these special Bane buffs, and if you pick them up, you can significantly increase your grenade damage. Like, I'm overall pretty surprised by the fun perks you can find on legendary items. My go-to SMG automatically reloads after 4 crits, so I rarely have to do it myself. You also have perks that out of nowhere spawn a grenade that deal 100% more damage, and there are elemental effects you can toy around with that also have special synergies. And after doing the before mentioned support missions, you can then at your home base really tweak your gear and weapons to better suit your playstyle. So there's quite a lot to build around, and I do want to check these features out more, because they really make the combat next to the regular things you have to worry about a bit more exciting. But again, you have to be down for this loot grind and the build tweaking, as that's the only progression the game has to offer after the pretty short main story. And I just don't see that being enough to keep players engaged until the first content drop in March, which probably is still 5 weeks away from now at the earliest. On paper, the seasons seem to be pretty big, because next to a new character, with Joker being up first, we also get new missions, boss fights and gear to earn, but this content will remain in the game forever after it released, so even if you buy it, let's say later, at a discounted price, you will probably have a way better experience because there's more content to chew on. So that makes recommending it right now, even if you like looter shooters, a bit harder. So I would say my conclusion, and I also want to quickly talk about co-op versus solo play. Like, if you are on the fence, I would wait, because again, it's totally worth experiencing this game at one point, but not for full price unless you have the cash and are dying for like a cool DC story campaign and are interested in an end game that is built around doing the same limited missions and activities enemies for better loot. I also want to say that the cosmetic options for a game like this, where you constantly look at your character, are really bare bones. They of course want to sell you outfits through the store, but they could have still given us more for free. Because you can only earn a few tweaks to existing outfits by doing the Riddler traversal missions, and apart from that, there's basically nothing. And for a superhero game, that's really, really bad. Now, I want to say that I'm really surprised by how solo friendly this game is. You can also, alone, just quickly switch between the characters in the open world, which is not possible in multiplayer, and the AI never gets in the way of things. Maybe weird to say, but I actually prefer to play this game solo, as in multiplayer things can get really chaotic real fast, especially because you often have to travel a bit to get to a new platform to fight new enemies. And if your co-buddy already went there first and cleared everyone, then you're sometimes just running around without anything to shoot. And since you can only get your shield back from killing enemies in a particular way, having no one to shoot can cause some issues. While solo, you have everything under your control, and the enemies tend to have less health as well, so they die way quicker. It's just an overall better experience. So even if you are a single player person like me, I think this game is totally worth your time, but probably till it goes half off. Like, I can more safely recommend it at like half the price, or you should totally 100% play it if it hits Game Pass at one point, like Gotham Knights eventually did. If you got any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them. Of course, subscribe, because we will have way more videos on the game. A like would really help me out, and check out other Suicide Squad content by clicking on the screen. I will, of course, speak to you very soon. Goodbye.